I've hardly made a secret of my love for Kill la Kill in the past. It remains one of my favourite shows, and likely always will. There's one simple reason I find it so interesting to talk about though, and it lies outside of the art style, plot, music and characters, though I love them all. That reason is that it surprised me. It surprised me more than any other show has, and likely ever will. So, to look at why I found it so surprising, I want to explore my assumptions, and how Kill la Kill broke them. Moderate spoilers ahead. Assumption 1. Fanservice ruins everything. Of all the assumptions I'm going to list here, this is the one I still have trouble getting over. Fanservice sucks, and the sorts of fandom it encourages are pretty gross. Say I want to buy a Kill la Kill t-shirt. I could spend hours looking for a t-shirt that celebrates the characters I love, or I could just buy a t-shirt that celebrates certain aspects of the characters I love. My assumption was, and to a certain extent still is, that fanservice undermines characterization, that it adds nothing to the characters and only adds value for a certain subset of any given fandom. Enter Kill la Kill. For many, myself included, the first impression Kill la Kill will leave is from scenes like this, or this. While I was also struck by the art style and enamoured by what remains the best introduction any character has ever received, I was predominantly left with an impression that was based on those scenes I mentioned earlier. This was an assumption that took a while to break, but break it did. With a relentless stream of partial nudity, it eventually became background noise. And then, when said nudity was, very much to my surprise, justified in the narrative and the themes it explored, I had to admit I was wrong. Here was a series that used the visual language of the very media that gave rise to this assumption, that also justified that use, and even celebrated it. Kill la Kill is hardly subtle, boasting a narrative in which clothes literally consume people. Conformism is mandated and free will controlled by fashion companies. Class structures and the privileges associated with those at the top of them are recognised and enforced by the clothes people wear, while the group fighting such class structures goes by the name Nudist Beach. It's not subtle, but it was more than a conflict between sentient clothing and a group of nudists. It was also a clever deconstruction of class structures, fascism and the fashion industry. And if that narrative and those themes are conveyed through the fan service that I found so uncomfortable in the first episode, then so be it. Assumption 2. I don't get comedy in anime. Whether anime is a medium, style or genre remains a popular debate, and one I plan to discuss in the future. But the comedy in all the anime I'd watched prior to Kill la Kill just hadn't clicked with me. Whether it was Code Geass or the comic relief in Cowboy Bebop and Death Note, I either didn't like it at all or thought it was the worst element of the series. Kill la Kill not only lent heavily on jokes and puns, some of which didn't even properly translate into English, but it also lacked the darker moods that I enjoyed in Cowboy Bebop or Death Note. It was distinctly lighter in tone, and initially I had assumed this would be a problem. As I watched through it though, I became quite taken with the irreverent dialogue, whatever Mako's performances could be called, and I loved the way the tone of a scene could switch on a dime from delightfully stupid to pretty metal. And sometimes both at the same time. The gags would fold upon themselves, each repetition deriving more and more from a simple premise as the show built its own comedic vocabulary. And, most importantly, it never took itself too seriously. In short, I loved it, and I've since come to appreciate comedy in other anime, such as the delightful Aggretsuko. which itself surprised me quite a bit, but that's a discussion for another video. Kill la Kill surprises me at every turn. Its fan service, initially so on the nose, was, at least outside of a few scenes, quite easy to get used to, and its comedy both stood alone and enhanced what surrounded it in ways I hadn't expected. There was one thing I came to expect though, something that had me excited for every episode: its style. Assumption 3. Anime is stylistically stagnant. Before watching Kill la Kill, I thought anime all felt the same. Sure, a series might have characters with a more or less realistic style, or with a more or less bizarre haircut, but they all felt similar somehow. I'm not saying that Naruto and Death Note are similar in any way, but it felt like that. Somehow they seem to hide the shortcomings of animation, and to use its strengths in the same ways. To use music cues, animation techniques, or certain shots to communicate the same things. Again, they aren't similar at all, but it felt like they solved the disparate problems they faced in production in similar or expected ways. Kill la Kill and Trigger, the team behind it, took many of those solutions and flipped them on their head. The static frames and rigid compositions that made scenes more simple to animate were traded out for chaotic, character-filled tableaus and rapid cuts between keyframes. Rather than sticking to a single genre's tropes of character design, some characters looked more at home in a comedy and others in a drama, yet somehow both worked together. Corners were still cut, as they have to be in most animation, but they were cut differently. I could go on about the visuals, but Digibro better expressed pretty much everything I would have in the video linked in the card above. On top of using tweening and really well integrated 3D animation to create a unique tone without adding significant effort in production, Trigger also used music in an interesting way. While particular tracks are still associated with particular characters or tones as in other anime,
What?
Trigger didn't hide their music in the background, but rather made a statement or even a joke out of it. What shone through was the confidence Trigger had in each track and how they used them. Kill la Kill has style in spades, and while it isn't true that other anime doesn't, only Cowboy Bebop or Samurai Champloo even come close to having the style that I loved in Kill la Kill. Trigger just had a tremendous amount of confidence in their abilities, and stylistically went out on limbs another production company would have avoided at all costs. Part 4, Conclusions and Confidence. That insane confidence pretty well sums up Kill la Kill as a whole. It was confident where other shows were complacent. It took ridiculous ideas like nudists fighting a clothing company, or a school that enforced class structures through uniforms, and backed them up with wonderfully stupid notions like fashion equals fascism, and somehow it managed to knit them together into a show that was stupidly entertaining with a nearly coherent set of messages about capitalism, materialism, class, and, because I haven't said it enough times in this video, and only said it once in this really long sentence, fascism. I felt pretty dumb doing that. It was such a surprise, not only because it had a plot under the surface of endless stupidity, not only because that plot had some surprisingly interesting themes, not only because those themes were explored through surprising perspectives, and not only because it broke the assumptions I outlined in this video. It was so surprising because it felt effortless. Every episode offered a new surprise, every minute a new feast for the eyes, and every character a tremendous amount of satisfaction. Be that satisfaction comedic, cathartic, or Kiryuu. I'd better stop here before I descend into even more nonsensical rambling about fetish imagery, fan service, and fascism. But I would love to know what you thought of Kill la Kill. Am I just an idiot justifying my fandom through a tangled mess of political ideology? Were my assumptions about anime justified or totally misguided? Whatever your take, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Cheers. Have a good one.